This is Charlie Rose.
15 years ago, in the year 2000, Bill and Melinda Gates created the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. 9 years ago, in 2006, Warren Buffett pledged part of his fortune to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Gates Foundation has since become a leader in fighting global issues such as hunger, poverty, infectious diseases, and education. In 2010, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Melinda Gates joined forces one more time. They created the Giving Pledge. It is a request for the very wealthy to pledge to give away at least 50% of their wealth to charitable causes before they die. That effort has grown to include 137 contributors from 14 countries. Last week in Sun Valley, Idaho, I talked to Warren and Bill and Melinda about their lives and how the Giving Pledge came about.
Well, it really grew out of Warren's idea that we should meet with other people who'd been serious about philanthropy and learn from them. Why were they engaged? How were they thinking about it? And through those dinners, the idea that we'd actually create a group emerged. And it's really been amazing to us. We have a yearly gathering. People who have common interests will meet separately. And I've learned a lot. I look forward to those gatherings. It's not people pitching each other, but there's so much in common that we can learn, and sometimes people do end up working together.
I'll come back to what you've learned. Where did the idea come from, and what were you thinking about?
I'm not exactly sure where it came from. Like Bill says, we had a dinner that David Rockefeller hosted, and I would say it sort of evolved out of that. We had 15 or so people there, counting couples was 2. And we went around a table and we just asked people to sort of explain where their giving philosophy came from, not to make a pitch to anybody, and how their thinking went. And they talked about their families and they talked about their parents' influence. And it took at least 2 hours to get around the table. People were really interested in talking sort of peer to peer about it. And there was so much. We clearly hit a chord someplace. And then the 3 of us talked later on, and the Giving Pledge evolved out of that.
I remember you talking to me about it at the time, and you said you were surprised there was an emotional connection between people because they thought and they found themselves listening to other people and feeling like this is exactly the way I feel.
Yeah, they didn't feel awkward in talking about themselves. I think we're a little lucky perhaps in who we called on first even, because the first person, their degree of candor, the first couple, their degree of candor I think was contagious as we went around the table. So nobody engaged in any posturing or any of the thing of the sort, which you might get sometimes in a group, particularly where some of the people don't know each other well, they're acquainted. But instead of that, we got this very candid discussion by really everyone there, and they talked about their children sometimes, and sometimes their disappointments, or sometimes how they felt good about what happened with them. And it became clear that if a bunch of people somewhat similarly situated would get together, we'd learn from each other and perhaps have a lot of other good things come out of it. So it just sort of evolved out of that first dinner, I would say.
Melinda, how's it growing?
Well, it's been growing substantially. We have 137 pledgers now in 14 countries. And I think one of the neatest things now is when we get together for these annual gatherings. And the first night that you sit down at dinner, you realize you're amongst friends, that all these people we've met over time, not only we getting to know them, but they're getting to know each other, and they look forward to the event. I think because of the candor of the conversations we can have about what do you do about your children, what about the next generation, how do you think about a leader, how do you even start a foundation if you're just beginning, those are conversations you want to have in private in a small group, and I think that's what our gathering affords.
And Charlie, there's no one-upsmanship or anything like that. I mean, some of these people are being quite capable of that in different situations, but I would say it brings out the best in everybody, and they're not trying to impress the other person or anything. They're genuinely interested in successes, failures, family situations, whatever it may be, and so there's a level of candor that's really impressive.
Oh, you have an international dimension. Was that bridge hard to get people who were not as familiar with philanthropy as Americans are?
Well, one of the things the U.S. should be proud of is that it is the leader, the most engaged in philanthropy. And most of the really strong historical examples, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ford Foundation, were American foundations. And other countries are interested in it because whether it's helping universities or research or trying out new ways of doing education, philanthropy has proven, even though it's a small part even of the U.S. economy, it's been a very innovative part where people show new pilot programs that then really influence a lot of other activity. Most of our members are from the United States. We've done a slightly better job of reaching out to people in the United States, but the international piece is going to grow, and we'd like to see philanthropy strengthen on a global basis. We always like to see people getting involved when they're younger, a bit more collaboratively, and hopefully with even more of their resources.
That's one of the tenets, trying to tell people to think about this early in your life rather than think about it at the end of your life, because you're better equipped to make decisions.
Definitely.
At this time.
Definitely. And I think by having people come together, once they've decided that they're going to pledge, even if they're pledging to give it away at the end of their life, if they come to a gathering, they start to learn from one another about what's even possible in maybe the field they're interested in and how did you get going. And so, yeah, we're trying to get people to learn from one another and hopefully to get started a bit earlier, because if they put their brains against these problems, whatever they've done in their business life against the problems of inequity or whatever they choose, they can have a huge effect, and they're learning that from one another.
So what's the pitch to somebody?
He's the best at it.
I know, that's why I directed
I'm
it.
not. But, no,
You call them up and you say, what?
Well, I usually send them some material on it first because there might be some misconceptions about it. So I ask them whether they've gotten the material and whether they've got any questions. And
You read it?
And you know, what you want to do is get them talking. And there's some people that aren't interested, but a very significant percentage are. I've been amazed at, frankly, at how well it's gone. I would have said if we had 50 by now.
And then we have 130.
137, yeah. Somebody, I had a dinner here some months ago, and one of the people that came had misconceptions about, you know, that they had to do this or that, and by the end of the evening, this particular person was ready to join, and we'll give 99% in this particular case.
So what's the transaction?
The transaction is simply that they write a letter explaining, making a pledge to give at least 50%, although a lot of them name a larger number, but give at least 50% during their lifetime or at death to philanthropy. And then I encourage them to explain how they got to that decision. You know, is it from their parents? Is it from the examples around them, and why they're doing it? And we get some magnificent letters, and I tell the people I talk to that the letters are enormously important, because somebody 10, 20, 50 years from now is going to read that, like maybe Bill or Melinda or I've read about Carnegie or Rockefeller or Rosenwald or you name it. You never know what's going to strike a chord. It's like a lawyer making an argument. I mean, you try to name 20 reasons why your client isn't guilty, you know. Even though you may only think one or two of them are really that good.
You want to make sure you got the one covered that Mike respond to.
And you know, all you got to do is hit a chord on one of them.
But do you all make the calls? I mean, the three of you are engaged in a real personal way in terms of recruiting.
Well, the thing that
Or is there a
has
system?
worked the best is just to invite people to a dinner that's about philanthropy, and that's not a recruiting dinner. When I'm traveling around, I always look on my schedule. Do I have time for a dinner, even outside the U.S.? And you have anywhere from 6 to as many as 15, which is almost too many. And you talk about philanthropy. And then afterwards, if you get a sense that it might be a fit for them, I can follow up by sending the material and making a call. So, you know, a lot of the people who are joining already had the intention to give every dollar, but they do find the idea of being part of the group that it'll help them engage and make sure that it's a fun thing for them. We love the impact and diversity of philanthropy, but we also feel like it's a voluntary thing,
Right.
and it can be one of the most fun things you've ever done. And yet, hiring staff or picking exactly what cause, or it forces you to think about death and how your kids may be involved, and some in different ways than others. These are complex issues. And even somebody who's successful at business, it doesn't necessarily prepare you for answering these questions.
And sometimes they'll have to have a family conversation. So they'll say, we're in favor of it in general. We've kind of had an initial conversation over the years with our kids, but we've never committed like this. So give us some time. And and then they'll say, we'll call you back in 3 months or 4 months. And we do. And the neat thing is if they'll share with you sometimes the conversations they had with their kids because they're so proud of how their kids responded.
Yeah, we have one. I know one case where the kids actually talked one of the parents into doing it. When that parent was initially not inclined to.
What are the resistances to doing?
They don't want to give away the money. When I call them and they say, I'm actually planning to have all my money put in my coffin with me, I do not have much of a chance. But I tell them there's no Forbes 400 in the graveyard.
And how about people who say, I want to pass it to my family? That's what I want to do.
That's what they want to do. That's their business.
Yeah,
and we do have some of those.
If they want to
definitely
pass it all, then they're not a fit for the group. We particularly see that if the bulk of it was passed down to them, because then
this inherited
it's
wealth
like
is more
breaking
likely
a
to be.
chain. Why should they break the chain? So first-generation fortunes tend to be more philanthropic than inherited fortunes.
Well, the interesting thing, you have young members too.
Well, that's
31
huge.
years old.
Right.
Yeah.
That's huge. There's going to be 20 years from now there'll be dozens and dozens and dozens of billionaires, hundreds that have come up who their heroes are the Steve Jobs or the Mark Zuckerbergs or you name it.
I'm really particularly excited to see what Mark and Priscilla do. They're already learning a lot about philanthropy. Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan, how they will come at it because she's so embedded in health and he's so embedded in education and Facebook, and yet the way they see things together. So I think they will totally inspire a group of people.
We're having a session for the younger members of the family of people who signed up here in a short period. I think 35, I know 35 are coming, probably more will come. And their attitude toward philanthropy, some of them are maybe beneficiaries of trusts their grandfather set up or something. But it will it's the influence on future giving that I think will be very, very substantial. I think it's having an effect currently, but it'll be bigger over the years.
That's a group we call the Next Generation Group, and so they're getting together on their own. And so I think their next meeting is actually in Omaha, right?
Yeah, right.
What do you learn at these sessions?
We have people get up for almost TED-like thing and give a 6-minute explanation of something they're excited about, or something that's gone well, or something that didn't go well, so they think they're smarter.
A sharing of experiences.
Then we'll have breakouts, and so things like, can you do investments that advance your philanthropic means? We have giving internationally. We have scientific research, education. We had 4 breakouts this time, and people's main complaint was that they had to pick one of the 4 because they saw several that they were interested in.
I should make this before we start talking about the foundation in general. There is no legal commitment
Correct.
made.
That's right.
There is an ethical,
That's right.
moral commitment.
Right.
But that's it.
Yep.
When you set up the foundation, the two of you, what was the idea?
Well, we talked about it even before we got married. And so that was about 6 years into our marriage. And I was seeing that I could spend a little more time on it. I turned the CEO title over just that year. And we made a pretty big set of gifts, $20 billion that particular year. And that kind of forced you to get going. Fortunately, my dad...
It's a start.
That seems a big number for you, isn't it?
There's a bit of a payout of 5%. So,
I didn't know there were that many zeros.
both my dad and a great person who'd been a Microsoft executive, Patty Stonecipher, partnered to create the organization, even though between children and work, we weren't able to give as much time as we have now. And so we got started. And we can look back on that now and say that was the start of a learning curve. We did a lot of reproductive health. We learned about that. We thought, okay, let's do some science. We weren't working with governments as much. We learned that's super important. And so it was great that by the time we both got more time, the foundation was already going, had a core team of people, a bit of expertise, made some mistakes, done some things well. And so by 2008, when we're both increasingly engaged, there's a lot there to build on.
What were the principles that you began with?
That all lives have equal value, no matter where they are lived on the planet. And yet, as Bill and I would travel and read and look out, you'd realize we don't treat all lives as if they're equal. What we spend, for instance, in the United States to save one adult or one child from death, it takes $30 to save a child's life with a basic package of vaccines in the developing world, and yet we weren't doing that. We weren't making those investments as a world. And we said to ourselves, there has to be something we could do about it. So we decided to invest in health outside of the United States. We thought that's where we could have the most impact. And in the United States, we felt like not all kids were having an equal chance at a great education. And so our predominant investments in the United States have been around the U.S. education system.
Has that changed in terms of where you see the focus for this foundation?
Those two big themes will be our focus for our entire lives. Those are big enough problems that, once we lick polio, which looks good, we'll move on to malaria. And there's enough diseases for our lifetime. We'd love if the foundation in our lifetime really could conquer a lot of that, and so people then later could focus on other problems. And education has been, I'd say, the one where we've seen less progress, but we're still totally committed to it. It's the right cause, and the United States created this amazing framework that allowed Microsoft and Berkshire and amazing educations that we were both had the opportunity to have. And so we wish we could have the same type of impact in U.S. education as we feel quite sure we'll have on global health.
And I think the other thing to say is
you wish, but you're not sure you'll be able to achieve that.
No, we're not sure. It's of all the things we're doing, it is the riskiest. That is, we spend in education broadly about $800 million a year, and that money has not in some dramatic way, neither our money nor the other philanthropists, and there's some great partners in this, Michael Bloomberg, Eli Broad, a ton of people who do amazing work
on education,
focused on charter schools, on U.S. education. And as a group, we can't say that the educational scores have moved up a lot. Dropout rates have come down some, and there's a few points of light in terms of some good charter schools.
Warren, you're watching this from a place of friendship as they did this. You obviously, I think it got accelerated after Susie's death.
Right.
Began to say, what should I do? Did you have evolving thoughts about philanthropy?
I thought fairly fast about what I wanted to do. I don't go into a trance over decisions.
No,
and I had it well thought out before in terms of before Susie died, and then I had to make a change. But it was obvious what I should do, actually.
Obvious that you should give your money away, or obvious you know where to give it?
Well, I was going to give it away under any circumstances. There really isn't any other option, Charlie. And I had
you can't take it with you.
I had everything in life I wanted that money would buy. I mean, long ago. So money had utility to other people, and had no utility to me. Right. And then the approach that all lives are of equal value. That I wouldn't change a word in that. I mean, that is exactly how I feel. And then the question is what's the best way to translate a bunch of little paper stock certificates into something that is consistent with the belief that all lives have equal value. And here I had the perfect situation in that an entity was already in existence. It was run by two extremely bright, energetic people who are going to devote their lives to it, young by my standards anyway, as spending their own money, which is a real factor. So it wasn't play money. And so it was very natural, and of course I did it in conjunction with 4 other foundations too that were smaller that wouldn't scale up the same way. But
of your foundation?
Yeah, and all 5 of I couldn't feel better about it.
And so, what was your response?
Tears.
Well, it's really
Tears.
Both of us. Yeah, we took a walk, and We
You
were
and Bill
both
took a
in
walk, or
shock, and
Who was on the walk? You
The
and
two of us.
The two of us,
Yeah.
yeah. You just
And-
walked and said, wow.
unbelievable.
Wow, what a sense of responsibility, and you know, we benefited so much from our friendship with Warren, even independent of this. You know, the whole idea of giving it away. I read the Fortune article that was about giving it away even before we met Warren, and that had greatly influenced my thinking. And you know, then as we'd been going about the foundation, I'd been talking to Warren one-on-one, and he had a group of friends together when, within a few months of us being really inspired about, okay, global health, we can have so much impact, you know, I was just electrified to share my enthusiasm in front of Warren and a group of his friends early in the life of the foundation. And so he was an advisor, a helper, a mentor every step of the way. And the idea that, wow, we were going to be able to magnify this, and our sense of responsibility back to him would be even greater than it had been. It was very touching.
So what role do you have?
Just a couple of days ago, every July, I make a I multiply 5% times a certain number. It's still, I'm 84, but it's still well within my capabilities to do that. That's about the limit.
This is not a small number, is it?
So Warren just sent to the 5 foundations, I think 2.48,
2.8 billion.
2.8 billion.
Yeah.
That's your annual.
Worth
Well,
of
it's-
Berkshire stock. It's shares of Berkshire stock.
Right.
So he's named an amount, which, and then he takes 5% of that, of the remainder,
Right.
every year. And Berkshire stock has gone up enough, even though the number of shares goes down. This is a record, gift. Really incredible. So all 5 foundations got this amazing check. I hope we sent a thank you note. I'll have to check on that.
The thank you note is what they do.
Yeah.
Thank you note is what they do.
What is it that brings you the most satisfaction from being engaged with them in this work?
Well, it's the satisfaction of knowing what I built up over a lot of years is going to get used to improve other people's lives.
Have the ambitions of the foundation changed? Because clearly I have read the annual report, read his annual report, and didn't now read your report. And clearly you have talked about things about measurement. You've talked about the importance of government in terms of partnerships. How has it evolved in terms of the ideas that permeate the work of you three?
Well, we're on a learning curve, and from the year 2000 to the year 2015, the cause of global health had some great achievements. Some governments and we came together for a vaccine fund, Gavi.
Right.
Likewise, a similar set of partners for the Global Fund, which was about HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. And those funds were established and set very ambitious goals. And they ran into some corruption, and the prices didn't go down as much as they wanted, and some countries weren't getting this stuff out as much as they wanted. How did you build the management of those organizations? But overall, they were phenomenally successful. So, we'd probably put that at the top of the list of things that we really, can point to that we, with partners, feel incredibly proud of. And so I can rank, of all the areas we work in, those would be at the front. The education stuff, although we remain committed, we haven't moved the dial on the average math capability or reading and writing capability of particularly the inner city schools. But we have enough successes to really be energized and really get a pattern of, okay, how do you work in very poor countries? How do you engage the best scientists in the world to come up with new tools? And so I'm more enthused about the work today than even at the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And so are you?
Absolutely. And I think one of the premises we have about how we work has to do with innovation, that we believe in innovations, whether it's an innovation in a vaccine, a malaria vaccine, or an innovation that comes along technologically. those innovations allow us to push forward on behalf of the poor. So a great example is polio eradication.
Right.
We couldn't really be talking about polio eradication if we didn't have the right vaccines, the right tools, but also the mapping that's come along has what's allowed us to get down to the village level to know if we're making progress. And so we believe in innovations, making sure those come out of the labs from all over the world, China, India, the United States, UK, get them out on behalf of the poor, but then it's up to governments to scale up. So even though we've put in billions of dollars into vaccines, there are tens of billions put in by governments to scale it up so that we can have
So you're saying you do some
so
of the
many.
groundbreaking work in the beginning, almost
And then we get
pilot
the
projects that give people in government who have the ability to scale up.
Every single thing we're in requires government scale up, whether it's reducing tobacco usage, whether it's eliminating malaria, whether it's the U.S. education system. And we could spend down our resources on the U.S. education system in less than a year if we were just putting all of our resources into
But
U.S.
that's
education.
one extra value they bring. Both Bill and Melinda have the ability to bring others along with them, and both governments and individuals. So there's not only the funds of the three of us combined, but they have the stature, the eloquence, the experience to talk with maybe governments, maybe very wealthy individuals, and corral hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars additionally on this. So there's a multiplier effect.
You would know better about this, and probably better to speak about it than they are, because their participation on the ground makes a difference. To see them
think it's
in a
unmatched.
village in India.
No, it's unmatched. I mean, Rockefeller and Carnegie and Roosevelt, they did wonderful things, and they spent a certain amount of time on it, but they were not working 50 and 60-hour weeks, all over the globe and going to some very places I don't want to go to. It's hands-on to an extraordinary degree, and that not only gets results, but it attracts other people to go along with them because they know it's for real. It's big.
But you don't do it because you know it'll make a difference. You do it because you want to be there. You want to see it with your own eyes and feel with your own hands.
You have to.
Yeah, trips.
Yeah.
There's a mix of things, and some trips are purely learning trips where you don't go and see the government, you don't go and see the press, you just go out and see, okay, what's up with malaria or what's up with farming. We didn't grow up knowing much about even rich world farming, and poor world farming is quite unique. And then there's the trips where you really are sitting down with the president saying, hey, your vaccination rate compared to other countries is far lower. And so the way you get the vaccines out, you can do a lot better.
Yeah.
And
we're here to help.
And yeah, we'll put money behind it. There's a measurement system, so you will know what parts of your country or what parts of the ministry are really doing the job well. And so let's get engaged in this. And the willingness of those leaders to sit down with us and talk about these things has been a positive surprise for us. There's a number of countries, Ethiopia would be the top of the list, where they really changed a lot of policies. And although it took some of our resources, they made permanent changes to the health and agricultural sectors.
What kind of resources, what kind of people, what kind of institution are you creating?
We work with so many partners.
But are these all come together for the foundation, or are they sort of on hoc basis?
Well, it depends on what you're working on. So we have different gatherings in different settings. So for instance, in polio is a great example. We have UNICEF, Gavi, World Health Organization, all working together on polio. And so on the ground, you have different partners with different expertise. And then back in the UK or back in the US, you may be using a partner who's doing the mapping and the modeling and the disease surveillance. Some of it happens on the ground and some of it happens back at home.
But is it the foundation that's coordinating all this?
Yeah, we have about 1,500 people in total, most in Seattle, but with offices in Africa and India and China, also an office in Europe. And so we used grantees as much as we can. But a field like malaria, we have a group of around 20 people who are experts, and so they can go out to the vaccine experts, the drug experts, the mosquito experts, the modeling experts, and orchestrate those skill sets together, and then take that and say, okay, which countries are we going to get rid of malaria and how are we going to reduce that map. And so in many cases, we are helping to convene different silos of expertise with people at the foundation.
Talk about expectations. Polio, 2020, eradicated?
The best case, which is actually a possible case, I'm so close
Don't
to
make
it.
stock market predictions.
I'm so close to it, I can have a positive bias. But
So close to polio eradication.
Yeah, it's gone very well the last year. We haven't had a case in Africa since last August.
For almost a year, not one single case of
polio in Africa.
On the whole continent.
And so the only two countries that we've had wild polio cases are Pakistan and Afghanistan. And even there, the two regimes, including the army people there and the various political parties, have stepped forward to improve the quality of the campaigns. And so we are now reaching almost enough children that we feel there's a good chance of the last polio case being in Pakistan sometime in 2016, which then you would start a 3-year clock to make sure that we're looking and that there's not some hidden pocket of the disease, which is a very appropriate time period. And then that would lead to a certification, in the best case, by 2019. And that's so exciting.
You're living this, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, it's so exciting because it has been hard. It's been delayed from what was expected when the whole thing got started, but a lot of brilliant ideas came along in the process, and those ideas will apply to improving world health and going after other disease eradications once we're successful on this one.
When was the last time humanity eradicated a disease?
Only one disease has ever been eradicated, and that was smallpox. Last case is 77, and the certification was in 1980.
And think how important that was.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it killed millions a year, and the U.S. took the lead, and we did it. And they didn't even have internet and modeling. Now, they had some amazing people, but that was inspirational.
And I
One
think
thing- go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing that I think, besides the modeling now, is this expectation. You asked earlier about ambitions of the foundation. It's not necessarily just ambitions, it's expectations. So when Bill and I came into philanthropy, one of the things that was shocking to us is, when we were at Microsoft, both of us, you could get a report on your desk about sales any day of the week. You clicked on it, right? And well, you couldn't get it. So if you're trying to eliminate malaria in certain countries or eradicate polio, those data systems didn't exist. Now, every 30 days, we get a report on polio that says exactly which villages it's in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and up in Nigeria up until
One more example of the
last year.
significance of data in the data revolution.
You have to have data, and it allows you to know whether you're making progress, but it's also starting to allow us as a world to know how and where to act on some of these problems at a much deeper level.
And if you can eradicate polio, you wanted to give an inspiration to people that it is possible to do these things.
Definitely.
If you bring enough resources, will,
Focus,
and
talent.
focus and talent.
Yeah, after smallpox got done, the head of UNICEF, Jim Grant, a brilliant person who's responsible for saving tens of millions of lives, said, okay, our next phase is going to raise vaccination coverage from 30% to 80%. So he took the 1980s and 90s and got us very close to that percentage. So that's another miracle, really the second big miracle other than smallpox in global health up to this point. And it was all driven off of the kind of confidence and energy and resources that came because smallpox worked.
Warren, you got to look at this and say, my God, I couldn't be spending my money any better way.
No, exactly, and it's gratifying because to be able to translate an accumulation of wealth that really, like I say, it basically has no meaning in terms of your life unless it gets translated into something that where it really does save lives. One thing that is worth emphasizing is when you get into large-scale philanthropy like this. Take the eradication of polio. It's not a cinch. I mean,
There's setbacks too.
But in the field of philanthropy, big-scale philanthropy, it's not the batting average that counts. It's the slugging percentage. It measures if you do nothing but in life but bunt and get singles, you know, I mean, that's fine. You'll have a high batting average, but the best slugging percentages.
Got you.
A big foundation should be shooting for a high slugging percentage, not a high batting average.
And that is so reassuring. I mean, what Warren said to us and the other foundations that he put his money into is swing for the fences, and you've got to take risk, and particularly that we're working on problems that society has left behind. That rings in your ears when you're doing some really hard days. You know, and there are hard days where you feel like we're not making progress, or what haven't we seen? How did we not go about this right? We have to remember that it's these hard problems. And that keeps you going. That and meeting the people in the field, the amazing partners that we work with, but also the families who are lifting themselves up under unbelievable circumstances.
A couple of quick things, too. One, malaria, you're hopeful that by 2050, perhaps, if lots of things come together?
Yeah, we ought to be able to do better than that. We're in this period where we need some new tools. And so in the drug pipeline, the vaccine pipeline, the killing mosquitoes pipeline, there's some really good stuff. And we expect that sometime between 2030 and 2050, it could be eradicated. The actionable thing at this point is to take that map of where malaria is and pick a few areas and do regional eliminations. So Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, there's quite a bit of malaria there. That's one of the first regions that we've gotten all those governments together. Australia is helping, US, UK, and we're going to prove that even with today's tools, we can do it there. And we have about 4 or 5 shrinkages before we'll have the confidence and all the experts will align to say, okay, let's go after it in the heart of Africa. That will be the last place. Nigeria, Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, Equatorial Africa is the toughest. And so we're going to corner malaria there and learn as we go and then have that final push.
Childhood fatalities. Nothing could be more important.
Nothing could be more important. And the thing that is amazing about it is the world has made huge progress. Childhood deaths have been cut in half since 1990, cut in half. And part of that is because the UN, with the Millennium Development Goals, set a roadmap that said we have a goal of cutting childhood mortality by 2/3. Now, we got it by half. But what happened was all of the NGOs and the partners and the governments, we all started to say, what investments do we need to make? What investments in vaccines? What investments in malaria? How do we get malarial bed nets out and get them used? What do we need to do about women's education? Because if a child is 50% less likely to die if his or her mother has been educated because of every change that she then makes in terms of accessing the healthcare system or what she invests in her own child. So the world started to make those investments, and now we actually have a roadmap for what works, and so it's just a matter of scaling those things up more and more and more. Some are innovations like vaccines, some are very basic things like breastfeeding and keeping your baby warm and clean cord care, things we do in the United States. You can do very inexpensively, and it's just cultural change for women.
Malnutrition.
That attributes to almost half the deaths. And I think the saddest thing about malnutrition is that if a child isn't fed properly in what we call the first 1,000 days, while the mother's pregnant and then after birth for those first 2 years, they are not cognitively able to learn in school the way that they were meant to learn.
For every child who dies, there's 4 children who don't develop physically or mentally. It's only in the last 3 or 4 years that the incredible problem that is has become evident to us. And even today, understanding exactly which interventions solve malnutrition, we're doing a lot of pilot studies. You know, it looks like helping the women have chickens in an area so that there'll be more eggs, or getting cows so there'll be more milk. That is going to be an element of the strategy, and that's a nice one because it advances the economic well-being of the livestock owners as well as the nutrition of the community that they're in. But there's a lot that we are just learning, and we're trying to put some of the micronutrients into the salt, and why hasn't that worked in the past, and you need to cook with it, and You know, I will be smarter about malnutrition when you see me a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now.
In the last 2 weeks, our son, who's 16, Rory, and I stayed in a Malawian household. This couple was amazing to let us live with them for a couple of days. They just knew we were friends of the NGO who was there, and we wanted to learn. And it was amazing to see because they were diversifying their diet. They had learned that they needed to eat something more than maize. And so they had taken their little bit of money and invested in new chickens. And that was allowing not only protein for the family, but they were selling chickens on the market, selling eggs to their neighbors and getting a little more income. And then they were starting to diversify into pigs. And they had, by this point, 3 small pigs. And I said, well, what are you going to do with the pigs? Like, I thought maybe they were going to eat them. And they said, oh, no. That's a high school education right there for our daughter. That's part of the school fees. And that one, that's part of the school fees for our son. So when they can start to make those diversification, it not only helps nutrition, but it helps their livelihood, which then helps their family. And there is not a family I have not met around the globe when you ask them what their hopes and dreams are, they say, I want to educate my children.
Because they believe that is the ticket for their
They know
children.
it's the ticket. Yeah. They don't believe it, they know it.
You watch this, you must be on a learning curve yourself. I mean, to understand how much there needs to be done in the world, but how there are these solutions and these ideas that are coming out of this.
Yeah, but I've always been a great one for letting other people do the work, Charlie. and what you've just gotten through hearing, I mean, the difference between having 2 very smart people working partly with their own funds, committed, work, and who care enormously about it, compared to running some organization where it got set up 20 years earlier and it just gets handed from one person to the next. It's night and day, and this is the way to make a difference.
And do you think you're having an influence in terms of other people who will want to engage in philanthropy exactly the way you have engaged in philanthropy? Because you made a dramatic shift in your life. I mean, you led the way, then you joined full time. I mean, this has been, the way you spend 24 hours now is very different from the way you spent 24 hours in 1995.
Absolutely. The goals are very different. Some of the ideas of meeting with scientists or
the process of acquiring information.
I was well trained. The Microsoft work was like an ideal preparation. I'd say if we can share 2 things. One, that philanthropy can be fun and be living examples of that. And on some of the riskier causes, that we can get people to feel like, okay, it's a little bit less risky. Maybe they'll do it in a different country or a different way.
What does risk mean?
Well, risk, taking philanthropic money and spending it in Africa is very daunting.
Daunting because it may not be successful, or daunting because...
Yes, the idea of, okay, don't these governments always take this and it's corrupt, or even if you make progress, then there'll be instability and whatever you've done will be wiped out. Could I look foolish? And where do I start in Africa? Who do I trust? It took us many years and mistakes before we felt any confidence there. And so I think everyone in philanthropy kind of encourages other people to take a bit more risk and try something a bit more on the frontier. There are some great causes, endowing universities. That's a fantastic thing, and the scientists there do very good work.
Let me talk a bit about women and development. I mean, that's become a focus of yours.
Definitely. And the reason for that is because women are agents of change. And I think for too long, the community looked at them as somebody we should do something to, instead of saying they are the agents of change. And if you unlock their potential, that is, if you make sure that they're healthy and their children are healthy, and you make sure they can have some decision-making capability and economic opportunity, and you invest in them, they invest in everybody else. Every marginal dollar a woman in the developing world gets in her hands, she puts 90% back into her family. And she's often the one who's making the decision about what the kids eat, who gets to go to the health care clinic when they're sick, who eats first in the family. So we have to invest in them if we want to get huge, wide-scale impact. And I think we weren't, as a community, really looking at investing in women at scale, which we need to do and are starting to do. And secondly, how do you look at your programming? You can't just assume that if you do something, you create a new seed. We have now a drought-resistant maize, which is great, corn seed. But if we assume that the agricultural dealers in Africa would get it out to all the farmers, that's a false assumption. They don't reach women. So you have to go the extra mile to actually reach the women and make sure they get the crop, they get the seed in their hand, they understand the planting technique, and they can keep the income.
This must resonate with you a lot.
Well, if you believe every life has equal value,
Right.
I mean, you've got to be doing something for women, because the truth is, in many cultures and in our own, and going back for thousands of years in many cases, it has not been the case that society has said that women's lives have equal value to those of males. I mean, our own Constitution, you know, when it talks about the qualifications for the presidency, it has a whole bunch of male pronouns in there. I mean, we wrote that 13 years or so after saying all men are created equal, but just read Article 2, Section 1.
And the thing is, we can measure it. That's the other thing. I think in the past, it's funny, you know, so much of this has to be, and it should be about data, so we know where to invest. Well, first of all, we didn't collect the data about women. When we did household surveys, literally the household surveys in Bangladesh and Africa and India, the only question they ask is, who's the main breadwinner in the family? And as soon as they learn that, and it's the man, they go down that path. They don't even ask about secondary income. So there are so many places where we haven't had good data about women, we haven't collected it, but it turns out when you start to collect it, you can actually measure empowerment. You can actually measure when a woman starts acting differently, making different decisions, when she gets that economic means. So we're going to do that because that's when you get prime ministers and presidents to act differently, even in their own countries, and make investments.
And there's this thing you have called No Ceiling Report. What is that?
So we partnered in 2013 with the Clinton Foundation to really figure out where as a world do we have data on women. We used the Economist Economic Unit and UCLA to partner and say, collect all the data we have around the world in every country about women. Childhood marriage, where they were in the workforce, labor force participation, do they have a chance to go to school? And so we looked at that, and we also visualize it so that people could go up and read it, and now we're going to fill in the gaps where we don't have the right data. So the childhood marriage data that we all use and we all quote around the world, it's not very deep. It's really not. So if you want to know how to act in childhood marriage, we need a lot better data to know how and where to act.
How does technology affect all of this? For
Well,
better or worse?
technology is very helpful. If you're not careful, technology responds to the large markets, and so the middle income and rich people will drive what applications get written and how it gets used. But piggybacking on the amazing cell phone, the amazing internet connectivity, and saying, okay, what about a farmer who wants to learn when to plant their crop, which seeds to pick? What about a primary healthcare clinic, and making sure that the supply chain really gets everything there? We know, is that worker there, and are they doing what they should do? We can take that digital foundation and, with a little bit of extra money, make sure that financial services, health, quality tracking, even budget tracking, although we haven't done this yet, we're in the early stage of brainstorming it. How can you follow money and gather evidence of when the money's used appropriately, so that donors have more confidence, you know, that the auditing is really built in a low-cost way. So that digital platform allows us to be way more ambitious, you know, starting with satellite photography that's told us the population for these polio activities, all the way down to reaching somebody so that their savings account is literally on their cell phone.
When you go in the developing world today, cell phones are pervasive. I don't care what rural village you're in, there are cell phones, and they're the old plastic ones we used to use. But what that's allowing is those digital platforms, as Bill says, mobile money. In Kenya, 87% of the GDP runs through a mobile payment system today.
In Kenya,
87% of GDP runs through. But we've got them in the Philippines, Bangladesh, Tanzania. So these are happening at scale. A remote woman in a rural area, if her husband goes into Nairobi, let's say, to get a job, he can send digital money back to her on her phone. Meanwhile, she can be saving $1 a day from the eggs she's selling at market. So when it comes time for the school fees, they've got the money. And not only that, as the cell phones get better, and we're putting agriculture crop prices at market, when she gives her crop to a middleman, she now knows what the market price is. So when he comes back and says, I only got $10 a bushel, she says, well, the market price was 20. What that's going to happen when those start to become smartphones, women will tell you all over Southeast Asia, you know, we know that 1 in 3 women experience violence around the world. There's now an application that I can give 6 people on my smartphone network my cell phone number. And so if a woman gets in a violent situation in India, she can press one button and 6 people immediately know she's in trouble. And eventually we'll know her GPS location. That changes things for
If
women.
you improve agricultural techniques, though, you're going to change the lives of hundreds of millions of people. I mean, if you just look at what it's done in this country in a couple of hundred years. I mean, it was innovation, you know, when the planter came along, when the tractor came along. And if you look at how primitive agriculture is in so much of the world, you're really talking about hundreds of millions of lives that can be improved if you enable them to get more out of that acre than they've been getting before.
Just want to touch on, because I've seen what you've learned about Ebola and other possible diseases, and how this global community can do something that they hadn't done before to be able to make sure that the worst doesn't come.
Well, Ebola, we're still in the final efforts to try to get the numbers down to 0. The numbers are down quite a bit. And then even once they do get to 0, the 3 affected countries will need a lot to rebuild back to have decent health systems and get their economies going. But it's also a lesson globally. We were lucky that it stayed in the 3 countries and didn't get more widespread. There are diseases other than Ebola that will come in the future.
But you were concerned about an early warning system and the capacity to respond early with the maximum.
Right. And what you need is a reasonable healthcare system and then surveillance sites that are gathering data from them. And the foundation is reaching out to other people to say, let's get this early warning system going. There's a lot of reports being written about how to strengthen the WHO that kind of has the central role here. The contrast I've drawn is that when it comes to military activities, we have people in reserve, we do training, we plan ahead. For an epidemic, which could be a natural epidemic or even worse, an intentionally bioterrorism epidemic, we're not as ready. We don't have the volunteers and the supplies and the training. And so the only good thing that could come out of Ebola is if it's used as a wake-up call and those resources are put in place so that we'd be a lot faster. That will be very important if it's a more infectious agent than Ebola.
Warren, I'm sitting listening to these 2 people. It must make you enormously proud because of their enthusiasm and because of the commitment to be there, but also as they live this experience, they, like you, could be doing a lot of other things. But something brings the 3 of you to this table, to a table wherever you are, whether it's Seattle or Omaha, wherever it might be, India. The driving compassion and the driving will to make a difference.
Well, what you hope is that somebody listening, or just like we through reading or whatever it may have been experienced, Bill had parents that were very involved in philanthropy, that they just think it through a little bit as to what they can be doing. And a lot of people do things individually that I admire a lot more than what I'm doing just with money. I mean, they pour themselves into it every day in terms of helping. My older sister does that. She spends every day at age 87 helping other people. I mean, she's giving up far more than I give up. I mean, I'm giving up some money, but I'm not giving up time. And so I've had 2 people come 10,000 miles just to talk to me for an hour and a half about philanthropy and the Giving Pledge. It's fascinating. And a remote part of the world, I don't want to identify where they're from, but they if it strikes a chord, who knows where the ripples go.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Linda.
Charlie.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
For more about this program and early episodes, visit us online at pbs.org and charlierose.com.